On Christmas Eve, when the Wyoming sky carried a hard wind and the snowstorm moved like ghosts across the empty plains, a woman in rags stepped off the rattling stage coach and stood shivering at the edge of Red River Town, clutching nothing but a fraying bag and a single letter that had changed her fate forever. Her name was Eliza Thorne, 22, orphaned, cast aside by the wealthy, relatives who inherited everything her parents once owned, and now reduced to wearing patched skirts, torn shoes wrapped in old cloth, and a coat so thin it hardly deserved the name. Yet there was a strength in her eyes, quiet, determined, hopeful in a way only someone who had survived too much could be. And though the world had taken almost everything from her, she still held on to the promise written in that letter. If you seek a home, a fresh start, and a family to belong to, come to me. I'm a father raising a child alone. I will treat you with fairness and respect. J. Callahan. She had memorized the words on the 20-day journey west through hunger, sleepless nights, and cold that sank into her bones because they were the only warmth she had left, the only lifeline pulling her forward. She didn't know what kind of man this J. Callahan was. He only knew that he had sent for a mail-order bride, and she had answered out of necessity, desperation, and a strange flicker of belief that maybe God hadn't completely forgotten her after all. The townsfolk stared when she passed, snow clinging to her eyelashes, her face pale with exhaustion, her steps shaky. Some whispered, some judged, some pied, but not a single one offered help. Still, she lifted her chin and told herself not to cry. Not tonight, not when she had come this far. The meeting place described in the letter was a small, dusty general store at the end of the street, where a lantern glowed warm against frosted windows. And as she pushed the door open, a swirl of snow followed her inside, melting instantly on the wooden floor. Behind the counter, a grizzled old shopkeeper looked up from arranging tins of coffee beans and nearly dropped the tin. When he saw her, "You're Eliza Thorne, ain't you?" he asked, his voice rough but not unkind. She nodded quietly too cold to speak. "He's late," the shopkeeper muttered, scratching his beard. "He'd be here before sundown." Storm got bad faster than folks expected. Eliza felt her stomach twist, not with hunger this time, but with fear that maybe he had changed his mind. Maybe he'd seen the storm and stayed home. Maybe he'd looked at her letter and realized she wasn't worth the trouble. She sank onto a wooden crate near the stove, holding the thin fabric of her dress closer, trying to stop her hands from shaking. After almost an hour, the bell above the shop door jingled violently as a gust of snow blew in along with a tall, broad-shouldered man who stomped in heavy boots. A little girl bundled in a thick coat clinging to his leg. The man, James Callahan, carried the weariness of someone who had lived through more sorrow than he ever admitted out. Loud dark hair tousled from the wind, jaw unshaven, coat dusted with snow, and eyes that held storms quieter, but deeper than the one outside. And the moment he saw Eliza sitting there in rags by the stove, he froze, not out of disappointment, not out of judgment, but out of something like disbelief, as if he could not fathom that the woman who had bravely penned him letters filled with grace, humor, and kindness could be the same woman who now looked like she'd been through hell. His daughter, little Rosie, peeked at Eliza from behind her father's coat, her big brown eyes curious, her grip on his sleeve tight, but not fearful. "Miss Thorne?" James asked, voice low, steady, respectful. Eliza stood quickly, nerves buzzing through her thin body as she forced a smile and gave a small curtsy, even though her knees trembled. "Mr. Callahan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. For a moment he simply looked at her. Really looked tanned. Something shifted behind his eyes. Something gentle, something protective, something a good man feels when he sees someone who has suffered far too long. The shopkeeper cleared his throat awkwardly. "Storms get in real bad. Y'all best head out before the trail disappears." James nodded, then stepped closer to Eliza. "You must be freezing," he murmured, shrugging off his heavy coat and draping it over her shoulders. Before she could protest, the weight of the coat felt like forgiveness, like kindness she had forgotten existed, and it stunned her so much she nearly burst into tears. She tried to speak, to apologize for her appearance, to explain she wasn't always this poor or ragged, but James held up a hand gently. "You owe me no apologies," he said softly, as if he could see her shame and wanted to shield her from it. "You came all this way. That alone tells me everything I need to know." Rosie stepped forward timidly, looking up at Eliza. "Are you my new mama?" she whispered. The word hit Eliza straight in the heart, so sudden and fragile that she almost choked on her breath. But before she could answer, James crouched beside his daughter. "Let's not rush her, sweetheart," he said gently. "She's had a long journey." Eliza knelt too, ignoring the cold floorboards, biting through her thin skirt. "I don't know what I'll be yet," she said softly to Rosie, her voice trembling. "But I promise I will be kind." Rosie's eyes brightened, and she wrapped her little arms around Alyssa's neck without hesitation, warming her frozen heart in a way she hadn't expected. James watched the scene silently, a flicker of awe in his eyes, as if fate had placed the three of them there for a reason, bigger than any of them understood. Outside, the wind wailed, reminding them that home was still miles away. The journey back to the ranch was brutal. James had to lift Eliza into the wagon because her legs could hardly support her anymore. He tucked the blankets around her.